The Fellowship of the Great Physician welcomes you to House Call. Our hosts today are doctors of chiropractic, Dr. Gerald Lala and Dr. Richard Jensen, who is also a board-certified acupuncturist, practice independently in North Oaks, Minnesota. And Dr. David Schwietert practices in Rapid City, South Dakota. Let's join our hosts for today's program that will assist you in your quest for optimum health and well-being.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gerald Lala.
I'm Dr. David Schwietert.
And I'm Dr. Richard Jensen.
Wonderful to have you with us in this dimension of House Call. We're in for a wonderful half hour. I think you'll find it very, very interesting and learning more about how your body is made and your personality, and how other people's bodies are made and their personality characteristics too. This is part 5 of discovering your biochemical nature. That means that we have already concluded part 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what does biochemical individuality mean? It simply means that we all know that we have genetic characteristics, thus predispositions to either health or disease. We know that we have psychological predispositions that are related to environment as well as genetics. We have spiritual predispositions as well. And so what we're doing is, for the most part, focusing on the biochemical individuality of the 4 body types that have been established by science. What does that mean? It means that we know that you can take psychological tests and it will tell you if you're a phlegmatic or a melancholic and personalities of that nature. But what we're going to do is look at glands within your body that greatly influence your health. So as a little synopsis of our previous programs, the first program we discussed was the adrenal dominant type person. That means that their adrenal glands that sit on top of their kidneys are more dominant in function than other glands. It doesn't mean that the other glands are necessarily weak. It just means that their adrenal glands are more dominant and thus influence not only their psychological and spiritual nature, but their biochemical nature. Then we looked at what is called the thyroid dominant personality. Of course, our thyroid gland is here, and then we have 4 little parathyroid glands that are 2 above it and 2 below it. And the thyroid gland is a target gland. It is greatly influenced by secretions of secretions from our thyroid gland, and then those secretions go out to affect other functions of the body. Then we looked at the gonad dominant personality, which is more of a phlegmatic personality, and we saw that there are certain physical characteristics to gonad dominant persons, and gonad dominant persons are more common in females than they are males. And we looked at the different foods and how those foods influence, stimulate these glands, which affect not only our physical health but our mental and our spiritual health. So in today's program, we're going to look at the pituitary dominant personality, called a P-type personality. And from a psychological perspective, their psychological dominance is generally they're melancholic in nature. And so we're going to take a little bit of a look at that now, and then Dr. Jensen and Dr. Schwietert are going to take you on a wonderful trip on it. So a good word description of most pituitary or P-type is perfection. They're perfectionists. According to Webster's dictionary, the word means without defect or omission, sound, flawless, faultless. You don't know of any like that, do you? No. Most excellent, completely correct or accurate, exact, and precise. Unfortunately, one of their liabilities is mental obsession. So these people are generally obsessive and obsessive compulsives. And what you might, if you're really interested in some wonderful information on obsessive compulsive, we have some wonderful television programs that will be broadcasting a little later in the year, and they're just excellent. The mind goes around and around and around on a particular problem, and because they are not action-oriented, these pituitary dominant personalities are not action-oriented. They think a lot. They think a lot. They really do. And this is really a bad situation for people who have to live or work with them, and it usually leaves their life in a lot of chaos. Most pituitary dominants seem to share the idea of neglecting their bodies. They are not really much into the care of their bodies. You will not see a large percentage of them working out in a health club. They fear getting undressed in public. I'm not phlegmatic, and I don't like to get undressed in public either. So visits to the doctor are very traumatic and really avoided. And they wear shoes and socks on the beach. Wingtips. In other words, they don't go barefoot in the beach. And but they're so smart, these are very, very intelligent people, that they can play 2 to 3 chess games at one time. These are very, very intelligent people.
That's conservatively, too.
Conservatively. You know, I've seen some of them play 12 chess games at a time. You know, unbelievable how smart they are. So, our esteemed colleague from the Capital Health Center City of America, Rapid City, South Dakota, Dr. David Sweetert, is going to take us through, and he's going to bring up a wonderful slide here and talk about these pituitary dominant personalities. Dr. Sweetert?
Thank you, Dr. Lala. Before we get there, I want to just share a little bit about some of the physical characteristics that we would see in a P body type. Of course, in men, which we're going to see in just a few minutes, they tend to bald in a circular patch on the back of their skull. So when you're walking down the street, if somebody doesn't have a hat on, you can really pick them out fairly easily. Women, some of their characteristics, that they'll have smaller sized breasts for their body, cellulite that can accumulate in them, and they do not despise being pregnant but have little or no menstrual cramping. And another interesting characteristic about the P body types is that they almost look childlike. You know, as they age, they just have some kind of they just don't get wrinkles a lot. They don't look worn. They just have a cherub kind of like characteristics. They are often slender, underdeveloped. Their derrieres are small, shoulders are round, head slightly larger than normal for the size of their body. Hands and feet are small and fragile. Teeth are large and uneven, and the skin is delicate and they tend toward hives or dryness. And it looks like they've got kind of like baby fat all over their body, including their hands and their feet. Mouth is well curved, well shaped. Cellulite can be found inside their knees. And these particular people make really good, if they're not carrying a lot of extra weight, really good long distance runners. And it's been estimated they make up about 10% of the population of the United States. So they have this non-aging quality to them that makes it, they're very attractive people if they don't carry on a lot of weight. Now I'm going to let Dr. Jensen bring up a slide, and we're going to talk, and he's going to share with us a little bit about some of the hair patterns that the P body types would have. Well,
thank you, Dr. Sweetert. Do you want to comment on this one?
Well, again, while we're getting ready, we can see that from this slide that the pituitary body types, you can see up in the upper right-hand corner there, Lee Iacocca, you know, they have, he's kind of probably a mixture of adrenal as well as pituitary, but he has that round face, you know, he's balding in the back of the head. He carries weight all over, so he's kind of like, I wouldn't, you know, Pillsbury Doughboy is the best description. I'm not saying that he's like that, but, you know, they just kind of look rounded all the way around. We can also see that the lady on the left that's playing golf, she's got that golf swing, you know. She's got a smaller chest, a smaller rib cage, has a tendency to be kind of plump all the way around. Those are some of the kind of, again, characteristics that we see with a predominant P body type.
That Lee Iacocca picture up in the right that is circled for you, that's an A forehead, but if you turn him around from the back, you would see that balding spot in the back of his head. And I want to tell you something, that A forehead, that's what drove him to take Chrysler out of bankruptcy and make it into a viable corporation for some years. So he was a mixture. He was a dominant A, and a minor or recessive pituitary type, but that's an A forehead there, or adrenal dominant forehead. Okay?
And I think it's also important to remember too that, as we've stated in many of our other shows, that nobody is just one particularly strong, nobody's an all A. They're usually a mixture of other types of body types. So the importance of that is that we can see and understand that the characteristics kind of overlap and overshadow. We're primarily talking about some of the health problems that can relate with the P body type, since they don't want to go to doctors. You know, any health problem that they're developing, they're going to live with for a long, long time until it gets into a crisis situation. And another thing that we've talked about with P types is that they like lots of information. That they're not action-oriented, they don't make a lot of decisions, they just want more and more and more information. So even when you give them a ton of literature, unless it's in a crisis, they just don't want to make a decision. So how about that next slide? Let's see what else we can pull up and talk about. Dr. Jensen, why don't you make a couple of comments?
Well, if we're looking down across the bottom of the screen where you see P-type, again, that's called pituitary type. That's their dominant gland. And as you can see on the front side here, you have a gentleman that we're circling for you now. This gentleman has a balding pattern where it's in the back of the head, right at the crown of the head. And as we follow that across, you can see where it's even getting larger to the point back here. A lot of people who are AP type, they've lost the hair on the front on their forehead and on the back. So these mixture of characteristics, you can see that within the hair types. Looking across the bottom, this one here in particular, you can see that large bald spot on the back of the head. It's interesting. Some people will not even know that they have that bald spot because they don't see themselves from the back. But that is indicative of the P type and goes right along with the characteristics. Again, they generally have a rounded type of face, childlike characteristics, larger head for their body than what you're used to seeing. Very, very intelligent people. They love running because they love to think, and running is a thinking man's sport. You got all these things to go through your head over and over and over again. So they like long endurance type activities.
But they're not fun to play golf with because they stand there and think about the shot. They think and think and think about the shot rather than just get up there, give it a good whack. And there are many women who are pituitary dominant as well. They have thinning hair, and you'll see a large thin spot in the back of their skull, and they have trouble making decisions as well. I would say this, that is not my experience, and it might be yours, but I have not, even though they like to run, I have not found them to be the best body type for long distance running. I always thought A's were the best body type, the adrenal dominant. They can go and go and go, because the P-type just doesn't have the adrenals to keep them going, do you think? Or?
No, I think that's right, and I think that the T-body types are good for the short, fast distance, so especially in, the 100-meter, the 50-meter, the 200-meter, 800-meter, where those short bursts of energy come through. An A and a T, or a TA would be really, really strong. They got powerful muscles, but they're good for that quick burst.
That combination. I was thinking while we're talking about this, I was thinking about, what's his name? Johnson, who's such the sprinter.
Maurice Johnson? Ben Johnson?
Ben Johnson, who's such a fast sprinter that, to look at his body type, I would say that he's more of an AT. And the T is certainly for the long legs and the speed bursts. But he's got to have that tenacity that the A-type has. He's probably really developed that. And that's one of the things that people develop certain parts of these for themselves. And certainly that can come through diet and some of the discipline in helping them have the kind of different characteristics too. So these things are not entirely immutable. They can change.
Well, look at Marion Jones as an example of a sprinter, very powerful, probably a mixture of a T and an A in there, but just very, very powerful, well developed. And, their thighs on some of these short distance or sprinters. I mean, they're just huge, smaller upper body, but very big and well developed down below. And it's just like, and then you take a long distance runner like Frank Shorter or somebody like that, and you look at them and they say, man, there's just nothing to them. They're just all lungs and legs, especially of the Africans that come over and run our marathons over here, or even in the Olympics. But really interesting to see those different body types. And I'd agree with you that my experiences, you don't see very many long distance P body types in running.
I know that years ago, and I won't mention his name, he's a major scout of a major NFL football team. And they go through all these camps and everything to evaluate these college kids and for drafting in the NFL. And they said, well, what is the number one thing you look at in a male's body? What is the number one characteristic that you want? And he said, thin ankles.
Really?
He wanted, and he was basically saying he wanted an A personality.
Oh.
A Randy Moss kind of thing, an A personality. And because those are the winners. They're not team players, but they're the winners. And they don't fit well in like a team sports like baseball, because it is a team sport. But you put them out in the golf course, you watch a PGA, the LPGA, or the men's PGA, and you see the women who are winning. They got the high foreheads or they're either T's. The P's have a difficult time winning.
What about basketball players?
A types. Because
don't play well with others.
No. You think Shaquille O'Neal plays well with the rest of the guys?
No, I don't think so. Not unless he has to.
But yeah, and he doesn't have to play. He just takes up the whole court. All right. Well, Dr. Jensen, are you going to talk about some food inclinations now?
Oh, certainly. Well, the food inclinations for the pituitary dominant, they are predisposed to eating dairy products and fruits and ice cream and yogurt and those kind of things. It's interesting, if you go into like a fast food restaurant at like 3 in the afternoon, you can kind of pick out these people because the thyroid dominant people are in there looking for the fries. And the A-type dominant is looking for the burgers and the beef and all the meat to feed that. And then you come back to the P-type, and they're in there getting a shake.
Yeah. Ice cream, yogurt.
Oh, yeah. And that's
fruit.
With fruit, that's right. And so they have these new yogurt things with fruit and granola on them. They're after those. And so that's what they're really after. But they drink very little coffee or tea. They love eating all day. These are grazers, okay? And all their meals are equally important to them as well. Some people, it's breakfast that is their dominant, but their most, in the A-types, their most dominant meal is dinner. Though they love to have eggs, steak, and bacon for breakfast, their most dominant meal is dinner.
So what do you think computer nerds and people that are in the computer industry?
Oh, my. Well, there you run through the gambit, because there's a lot of times you have the creativity of the T-type there.
Yeah.
But the pituitary type, those are the kind of people that really think things through, and they get those things, all those algorithms and all that together. So you really run the gambit in computer people.
And if it's an A-type personality, they're not going to sit at that computer long. If it doesn't work, they're not going to call for tech support. They're just going to throw it up against the wall.
See if it'll stick.
They're actually the people at the helm of the company.
Yeah,
the A-types,
they're driving it.
The A-types are the ones at the helm of the company, and they're the drivers and so forth, and they rely on the T-types to say, hey, this is, here's new ideas and things like that, new products to go out there. Get the P-types that think it through, and then they have the other A-types that are down there that are just really driving the project home to finish it. And so, I mean, to have the mixture of those people in there, to have the creative T and the A-type driving as well, with the T and A, with the P-type that is also creative, so you have a mixture of these things, and it really makes it for an exciting world, really, to have those differences.
So it really kind of comes back to some of the things we talked about in working in our offices or working with people in our workspaces. That in the consultations that we have done with different people around the country, to see when there's an office that's in trouble, whether it's a small 2 or 3 man operation or if it's 20 or 30 people, when you see that these personality, these physiological characteristics of the body types, when they're mismatched, you've got trouble, you've got problems, you've got people coming and going, they're getting fired or they don't show up. And so having an understanding of these body types will really liberate you in your own relationships, in your personal relationships, as well as your work relationships, to understand, oh, okay, now I know Mary and I see that she might have a tendency towards this. And not to say that everybody's one thing, as we said before, but it'll help you understand and have more, I like to think, grace. Have an understanding of grace, and it doesn't necessarily excuse what they do or don't do, but it'll at least help you understand where they're at.
Yeah, and people, women who are A-type personalities whose name is Grace, now that's a real paradox.
Yes.
I know that when I was in flight school, and that was just a few years ago that I was in flight school.
Just yesterday, wasn't it?
And I was telling you about my flight instructor, you know, was a Marine, and he had combat in Korea and the Second World War, and he judged people by their personalities. He's a very smart guy, and he said that melancholic personalities do not make good combat pilots.
Yeah.
Because they're going to sit there and think. And I want to tell you something, when you're a combat pilot, you don't sit and think, you react.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have instant reflexes, because you're going to die
If you don't.
If you don't. So
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep. So what you have here is metabolic keys to these people. These people seem to have a predisposition towards lots of colds, allergies, headaches, and intestinal gas, you know, which would follow from the difficulty in eating all those dairy products too. Did you realize that like cheese contains something like over 300 compounds in it of different types of food that you have to digest? It's one of the most complex foods, therefore the most difficult foods to digest.
Harder than peanut butter?
Harder than peanut butter, maybe. I think peanut butter is mainly due to the aflatoxin that forms on the outside of nuts if they sit around for too long. But these people, they sleep poorly. They sleep in spurts, so it's an hour here, 2 hours there, so forth, consistently. Then they also like to have the windows open. They sweat easily, but they sweat lightly, okay? They glisten, yes. They have problems with their knees. Sight is their strongest sense, so they're very visual people, where touch is their weakest sense. And that's probably why you see, you know, a lot of people who touch is their greatest sense and so forth. They tend to be more in sports. Those people who are less kinesthetic, more sight-oriented, stay away from sports.
Pituitary dominant people are not huggers.
No,
they're
not
cold.
huggers.
They're not touchy-feely.
Oh.
Right.
I think that's why there's a lot of them from Scandinavia.
Really? Now, I thought it
You
was
ever
just because
notice
they
that?
were cold.
No. I think that it's something to do with genetics of Scandinavians. There's a lot of P-types there.
Interesting.
You know, they say in order to be politically correct, you're not supposed to bring up their genetics like that. So we could talk about Hittites. We're not people who aren't around anymore. Anyway.
Are those Old Testament people that stabbed you in the back Hittites? No?
I don't know. Who was the guy that was a Shuhite? Shortest man in the Bible. When they miss exercise, they become totally overwhelmed by their problems. Their highest energy is in the morning. So these are people that get up and you want them to be at work early, because that's where they really shine, is in the morning, and lesser so as the day goes on. We were watching one of these NOVA programs about the deadlines that people at NASA for the Mars probes and things like that. And one of the guys, there's so much stress, he said his exercise increased exponentially. He was like running 3 times a day in order to get rid of the stress. And if you think people at NASA, they're thinkers. They think through these problems a lot, and that's what they're paid for to do. And so it's good that they do use this as an outlet. Psychological keys, shall we go into that with Dr. Lala?
Yes, and as we do, we know that we're talking about some fun and exciting and very interesting information. We want to bring up a pamphlet that you might want to call us for or write for. It's all about what we're talking about here, and it also talks about different foods and different tests, blood tests that can help determine food sensitivities. And the one that you want to have performed is what's called a combined IgE and IgG4 food allergy screening. And we have really two major forms of food allergies, and one is a fixed allergy, which means that when you get near something or eat something or near an animal, you have a reaction, an immediate reaction. And the delayed food sensitivity reaction, which is a very neglected form of allergy testing in Western society. Test for allergies that are delayed or cyclic. You might eat something now and not 4 or 5 hours or even 24 hours later have a reaction, and then not relate that reaction to having eaten a certain food that causes your migraine headache or your intestinal bowel syndrome problem or your fibromyalgia or your joint aches like fibromyalgia. So it's something you might want to call or write about. It's a very worthwhile pamphlet. There's no charge for it. Okay, some of the psychological keys of P-type or pituitary type personalities. Their personality characteristic is largely melancholic. They have a tendency to work on essential, what they consider essential projects, and are inclined to technical or theoretical areas. They show amusement rather than laughter. That's a real characteristic. They show amusement rather than laughter. They're obsessive and withdrawn. Very slow to anger. They are ivory tower types, as Dr. Jensen was just talking about here. They have a tendency to be pious and keep distance between themselves and others. And many of these men and women have been drawn into religious work. They are. That plays into nice with religiosity and piety and things of that nature. And standoffishness from others. Very few friends. They have very few friends, but are very close to those few who they are friends with. They generally are disinterested in sex once a week or so if they're married. They have the curiosity of a child, which is kind of interesting to watch because they always go off into other tangents instead of going ahead with the project that the team has agreed to go forth with. They have the creativity of a thyroid-dominant personality and the strength and the determination of an A-type or an adrenal-type personality. They have a tendency to be geniuses or near geniuses. They enjoy deep theological or theoretical or philosophical discussions. They exercise to get high. That's the only reason they exercise, to get high, to pump up their adrenals. And they have a tendency to be perfectionists. They're introspective. They are detail-oriented. They're slow to anger and very forgiving. They're prone to associate with con artists. They really are. You can see them coming. You can see them coming because they themselves get taken in easily. And frankly, I would never, ever make an investment with a P-type personality because they are gonna, sooner or later, it's all gonna go down the tubes. It really will. And so, anyway, whatever type of personality you are, Jesus loves you. You are created in God's image, and we can take renewal of our minds so that we change and become more Christ-like.
The Fellowship of the Great Physician, through its School of Health and Healing, provides classes each Thursday evening. The primary focus of these classes is biblically based spiritual health and healing, with a brief teaching on physical health and healing. There is no charge or registration fee for these classes, but a free will offering is received. For further information on the School of Health and Healing, class time and location, or the topics discussed on today's program, contact us at the Fellowship of the Great Physician in care of Dr. Lala or Dr. Jensen at 200 Village Center Drive, Suite 100, North Oaks, Minnesota 55127, or telephone us at 651-484-8521, or contact us at the Fellowship of the Great Physician in care of Dr. David Schwietert at 3936 Jackson Boulevard, Rapid City, South Dakota 57702. Telephone 605-721-3861. Thank you for joining us today.